of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 6. Kara was dying, floating over Alchera, her parents' hands on her shoulders. She tried not to struggle, but the panic overwhelmed her efforts, and she knew it didn't matter anymore. She was unable to keep from screaming, thrashing, and using up her oxygen. She heard in their voices, "It's going to be over soon. We are here." The image of their broken bodies lit her mind, and she couldn't change it to a picture of them dancing. She imagined lying down on the floor with them, back in that room with the inevitable and the irresistible. She reached out her hands for theirs. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't save you. I couldn't save me. I couldn't save them." She released every painkiller from her Omnitool into her system, felt the pain from the cold in her lungs lessen, but not the panic. That was deeper, inevitable, irresistible. She would lose consciousness soon from lack of air and the drugs. She reached for her parents and thought, "Be my breath. Always."
Garrus had gone to bed late, researching, reviewing, and refining new training and hiring policy, particularly regarding Turian biotics. Turian biotics were not supposed to exist. He knew they did exist, knew them from his experience in the military and CSEC, but they were expected to suppress their talents and not admit to them. Turians were trained to ignore blue glow. It wasn't mentioned. It usually only happened with anger or when someone's life was in danger, involuntary or self-defense flare. He was proposing that Turian biotics serve openly, something he could do that Palaven was not willing to do, something that would draw new talent to the Citadel, create a refuge. He was going to propose that human and Asari biotics also serve in CSEC, another new idea. He needed help putting together a set of advisors to advocate for biotic needs, rights, and training. It was going to be a fight, one he relished. He blearily ignored the first few alerts, but a cascade of them convinced him to wake. He dragged himself reluctantly away from sleep, rubbing at his eyes to clear the blur, and saw the first alert in the queue. SSV Normandy destroyed. Commander Shepard dead. Surviving crew rescued. No. He scrolled through the headlines and messages, multiple sources. He had alerts keyed to her name and no possibility this was a hoax or a lie. It had to be a hoax, or a lie, or a mistake. She couldn't be dead. It wasn't possible. He scanned the articles for details. He scrambled with shaking hands and found Liara's contact. Her face appeared, tear-stained and grieving.
"Garrus, I'm so sorry."
"What happened? Are you okay?"
I'm fine. She made me get in a pod. She went to go get Joker. He says it's his fault that he wouldn't leave."
Fury blended with the helplessness and the grief. "Liara, are you safe now? How do you know she's gone? Could she still be out there?" Liara shook her head.
No, she was blown clear, her oxygen line severed. Joker said he was able to watch until
Until she stopped moving, until she died from asphyxiation. What hit the Normandy? Geth? She shook her head.
No, something. Joker said it was huge, 20 times the size of the Normandy, with a weapon that sheared her into pieces.
A Reaper?
I don't know. Didn't look like Sovereign. He says something different. Something big. There are a few recordings of it. Some crew could see from inside the escape pods, but those won't be released to the general public. For now, it's classified. I didn't see it. I can't believe she's gone. I shouldn't have left her.
Garrus saw himself, saw Liara as though out of his own body, disoriented and insistent on his memory of the woman who was now gone. Liara, don't blame yourself. You followed orders. You and Joker are alive, and that's the way she wanted it. Liara's eyes closed and squeezed fresh tears.
I know. I know. It doesn't make it better.
No, it doesn't. But it's true. A truth that won't respond to public opinion. Liara, thank you. Take care of yourself. If you need anything, you come find me. If you just want to talk, you come find me. You don't need a reason. She nodded and broke down crying again. He ended the call. More information came as hours passed, but he was done with questions full to overflowing with waves of reflexive denial alternating with horrified acceptance. Shock persisted. The out-of-body sense of trying to think like her blended into lost time spent staring. Reading articles and watching broadcasts made it seem like a tragedy separate from him, something so big that he was blessedly dwarfed in it, an observer. Commander Shepard was remembered by people he'd never met. She hadn't just been on the SR-1. She had a whole life he didn't know. Then he remembered he'd planned to know it, wanted to know it, and wouldn't. He hadn't asked for that bunk. 22 people lost, including her. He wanted to rage, but he knew she wouldn't like it. Something about the way she cried at Ashley's memorial. The way she'd sat, all the colors of vulnerability in her face and her voice. She hadn't said a word against the council or even Saren. It had been about Ashley. She had waited until she could take action, months later, the council grounding her, resulting in him having authority and reams of actionable data. She had never allowed rage to dictate her actions. Every ounce of her will had always been focused on a goal, and she never lost sight of it. He said aloud, "I remember, Shepard." He still had apple juice in his refrigerator, so he went to the kitchen, poured a glass of Harusk for himself, a glass of apple juice for her. He stared at her glass, toasted to the sky. He ignored every alert as he slowly sipped and savored the burning alcohol that left his tongue numb. It added to the shock, the disorientation, and the swirl of memories as he contemplated what she would have wanted. "You'd want me to do the hard thing, the right thing, and fuck if I have any idea what that is right now, because I want a break. What I wanted, spirits, what I wanted was to find a way." He couldn't say it out loud. To be together seemed trite, stupid, and something to keep to himself. "You deserved better, Shepard. You deserved better than Mindwar. You deserved better than the Alliance. You deserved better than the Council. And you deserved better than me." He, like Liara, like Joker, was going to have to live with the fact that he was exactly where she had wanted him to be. And she was gone. He gripped the glass, pressed it consciously and carefully to the table, didn't squeeze too hard, counted the last few sips of self-indulgent alcohol out on his tongue. He flipped the empty glass over when it was empty. No more. No more what I want. Looking at the apple juice, he contemplated what to do with it. Pour it out? No. Do something self-indulgent? Sure, this is my last chance. Once I leave this apartment, no more self-indulgence. He shuffled through his alcohol collection, found something with a clear bottle, spherical. He poured out the alcohol, cleaned the bottle, removed the label carefully. He poured the apple juice from the glass and the refrigerated container into it. Doing some research on canning methods and times and temperatures. The feel of glass and the steady hand needed for dealing with high heat, his mind focused on research. It helped. He could do something constructive instead of destructive. He held the result up to the light of the Citadel through an open window, his personal self-indulgent relic, the heat gradually dissipating to room temperature. "Yeah, Shepard, it's stupid. I know. Just give it to me this one time. I promise I'll do better." He put it down carefully on the windowsill where it would catch the light, stared at the clear amber for an unmeasured amount of time. He looked up how long it took a human to asphyxiate. Loss of consciousness by 3 minutes, brain death by 6. She suffered. He'd like to tell himself that it was only for a few minutes, but it didn't matter. She suffered long enough. Time had slowed down for her, panic and pain and loss. He decided shock was a good thing. He used it to get him through a shower. He dressed, he ate, he moved through life by habit. Denial faded first. He had to accept lost choices, lost chances, and get on with new ones that would make her proud, ones she'd make. Shepard, I wish I had your mind. I'm going to do the best with the one I have and what I know you would want. And he did know. It was hard to do, but he did know. He went to work. He checked in with every living member of the Normandy. His fury with Joker was gone the moment he saw Joker's face, heard the hollow loss in his voice. He checked in with the families of everyone that had been lost. The only person with no family to notify was Shepard. No, that's not true. I'm your family. You're not here anymore to argue with me about it, so last person standing wins. Nobody else needs to know it, but I'm your family. Anderson came by to see him at work, and they exchanged now practiced words of condolences. Anderson then told him,
She left a will.
Garrus tilted his head, narrowed his eyes, curious but unable to speak or ask. His throat closed tight.
Everything goes to you.
Spirits. I am her family. She knew it. Anderson knows it. I bet Liara knows it. I bet Joker knows it. Hell, I bet Rex knows it. He couldn't keep the subvocal combination of permitted and acknowledged grief and thanks from vibrating in his throat, but Anderson couldn't hear it.
She didn't own her apartment here on the Citadel, and she cleared out everything before the Normandy went on her mission. What she has left is in an apartment in Taisei. The place goes to you, and everything in it. You can do anything you want with it, sell it, give it away. It says she trusts your judgment.
Did she ever tell you about Taisei? Anderson shook his head. It was damned Pinnacle Station, the simulation. I don't think I've ever seen her have so much fun. Manic fun, but fun. Games to her, impossible to resist. If the Reapers lured her into a series of time trials, we'd never get her out. First someone better his gun, then the station master better this apartment. And I think she'd have done it for free. I think she'd have paid. Anderson drew his brows together, missing some context, obviously. Garrus said, the final scenario, I couldn't believe she agreed to it, but she was laughing. They turned off all the safeties and reenacted a Turian attack during the First Contact War that Ahern lived through. So we're being overrun by virtual Turians. Now I'm a little insulted about that, but trying to stay alive. Shepard's laughing like it was the most fun she'd ever had. Liara looks like she's about to cry. I ask Shepard if she's proud of herself for being goaded into suicide, and she laughs and says, Garrus, how many opportunities do I get to go into a fight where I know my side already won historically? To her it was a sure thing because it had already been done, and I realized how low the odds were that we were going to survive most things. And we won. Of course we won. We had her. Anderson ducked his head and smiled.
We're planning a memorial placement and a service. I'd like you to speak.
It would be an honor. If you need any help.
I'll ask. Thank you.
Do you know when?
Probably a few weeks.
Okay. I'm going to take a trip to Taisei. I will be back by then.
Let me know your schedule. We won't hold it without you.
The ridiculousness of Taisei buoyed Garrus somehow. A prefab in the middle of nowhere, won on the suicidal bet to a woman who owned nothing else. It took him a few days to steady people, make sure everyone knew that he was grieving but sane, which was what she would have wanted. He was going to be responsible if it killed him. That's how she lived her life. Eventually, the responsibility had killed her. He had moments of rage and helplessness, but he was anchored by responsibility, one she'd given him. It needed to be done, and he'd do it. He arrived in a long-range shuttle half expecting the place to be gone, because again, prefab in the middle of nowhere, but it hadn't been looted. It was improbable, and that suited her. He imagined her sense of humor, embracing this place won in a deadly game she could have opted out of entirely. But he had been there, seen her face. Something about her was most alive in deadly games. Some deep reservoir of calculated gamble rose up. He'd seen it, smelled it, been there time after time as obstacles were revealed, ideas occurred to her, and her guarded eyes stayed the same, but her smile. Her smile in battle was a heady thing. He'd never seen her laugh the way she had at Pinnacle Station before or again, but that smile that couldn't be fully suppressed, that little quirk that meant people were going to die, and not her people. He'd been raised in a military tradition of intimidation and status. She was good at that, but even better at that little smile. He was buoyed by the fact that she'd thought of him, had taken actions for him, had given him this exclusive right to be here, his fingertips passing over surfaces, taking in the view. There were only a few stacked containers of her belongings. Stuffed animals, strings of lights, kitchen utensils. He moved to another box, brightly colored pillows, an old, no, ancient Omni-tool. Were these her belongings? Yes, they smelled like her, the pillows and the animals. Realizing that, he packed them all back in except for the Omni-tool. To have something somewhere that still smelled like her made it worth the trip, the bizarre, confusing trip. Commander Shepard liked stuffed animals? He imagined it briefly, the woman that looked like and smelled like metal. No, not her. The woman that explained that he was her only friend and said frostily that not drinking alcohol was frowned upon as a life choice. Yeah, maybe her. He was going to do one more self-indulgent, stupid, offensive, and possibly insulting thing, and he'd thought a lot about it. He'd thought carefully about ramifications and questions, decided he shouldn't, but then grabbed a shade of red paint that matched her hair before he'd come here. He told himself not to do it, that he didn't have the right to it, and then he decided this really would be his last self-indulgent thing. The last time he'd seen her, at his apartment, he'd tilted his crest to her hair. He'd had a plan. He'd known she could die at any time. He could die at any time. They could all die soon. There were clan markings, and then there were expressions of grief, of loss that were worn on the plate and the skin. He did not have the right to either appear bonded with shared clan markings or to the symbol of the loss of a bondmate, which was a stylized cut to the left mandible. But he was going to take her color, some of it anyway. He wouldn't lose his own marks, and it would be meaningless to everyone else. He looked at his face in the mirror and explained carefully to her as he steady-handedly applied red paint to the center of his crest. You didn't have family, Shepard, but you had me. You have me. This is the last place I touched you. I should have explained what touching a Turian crest to your head meant. It meant thank you. It meant I love you. It meant I wanted to have enough time. He stopped for a moment, hand shaking and breath short. He steadied his hand and remembered the curve of her lips as she figured out how to win, applied a stylized outline. So it's a Turian thing, but it isn't. It's a me thing. It's a you thing. I want a reminder every day of why I am where I am. Anderson said you'd love to see me as a counselor, so that's my promise, Lol. Anybody looking at me is going to see your smile. People are going to ask me about it, and I'm going to smile at them the way you smiled at me. All the questions you didn't answer, all the times you stopped talking, I'm going to learn how to do that. I'm going to honor that you never told me a spirit's damned thing about your life, but I know all I need to know. I'm your family. Incredibly self-indulgent, stupid family. It looked good. 3 stacking gentle curves in diminishing size, largest on the bottom with tilted ends, resembling the silhouette of nested bowls more than anything else. They were not literal. They were not Turian. They were not human. They were just his and hers in absentia. He only stayed for a day, stretched out on a bed that was hers and then his, therefore theirs. He packed the mysteries of boxes up in the shuttle and brought them back with him where they would stay unopened except when he wanted to remember what she smelled like. He fiddled with the Omni tool, so old that it couldn't connect to anything, old enough to be older than she was when she was born on Mindor. He was feeling obsessive and guilty, researching a hunk of ancient technology that was likely fried, but he really did not consider giving up. He did finally figure out how to get the thing to give a readout. There was nothing on the Omni tool except for a file he would need to transfer to access it all. He copied it over to his Omni tool and opened it, time-stamped to right after Pinnacle Station, before Vermeer, before Saren, before Apple Juice. There she was, with that strategic smile, as though she were about to do something audacious.
Hey, Garrus. This is stupid and all, but if you're seeing this, I'm dead. Unless you're someone that broke into my stylish middle-of-nowhere apartment, in which case... You're not as smart as Garrus, and I don't believe it. Anyway, I guess I'm dead. That is bad. You are now the proud owner of a bunch of inexplicable junk. Junk I love. I'm not sure I can explain the human tradition of stuffed animals, but this...
She pulled a battered stuffed Varan with tiny multicolored spots all over it from the container.
Is Sprinkle Bits. She does not like being in the dark. And this is Aloysius, and he does not like his name, but that's what happens when I'm allowed to name things. He does not care for cheese. Do not offer. He bites. This is a spatula. You were never involved in the brownie controversy of '83? I wish I'd learned to bake dextro, but I didn't want to make you sick. It isn't much, but it's meaningful. To me. You know the big stuff. These are the little things. Very little things. I also had a cat that came with me from Mindor. His name is Hale. If you could tell him, I'd appreciate it. Here's his contact info. I wish I'd had more time. I wish I had told you these stories while I was alive. I know you'd have understood. I know it. I'm not sure I understand. But you asked me if I was proud I'd been goaded into something suicidal. Yeah, I kinda am. I never saw it as suicide, but I've never been dead before. I may have to reconsider that stance. I'm also glad a Turian was bossy enough to tell me that he was going with me into something suicidal. There's a lot about me I never explained. That wasn't because I didn't want you to know. It was because I was your commander, and I could not burden you with the fact that when I was rummaging around in the shuttle bay, I was looking for a container to hide contraband. This.
He remembered she smelled like fear, realized she was afraid of him. The surge of subvocal distress vibrated through his throat.
You're tough, and you're strong, and it would be a bit unreasonable to ask you to follow me into something suicidal if you knew I paced my cabin discussing cheese with Aloysius. Truth is, I pretended a lot. I pretended to swear. I pretended to drink. I pretended to be hard and tough, and I pretended not to cry. Liara knows a lot about me. You can ask her. She kinda cheated and discovered all this during her first tour of my head. But you're the first person I wanted to tell. I hope I did tell you, and I just haven't made it back here to update this file. I want you to know that in a lifetime of hiding from people, being nowhere near as tough or strong as I appeared, you saw me, and I didn't have to hide from you. Even though I did, it's complicated, but what you did about it matters, so this is my life. I don't have much money. Keep it or donate it and give it to the families of... Well, I guess that's the point, isn't it? You'll know better than I do right now what would be best. I might know what's best on the battlefield, or manage to fake it, but unless it's a stuffed animal, I probably don't know how to talk to them. Kinda like now. I decided to do this and not take it back, and not write it down. I want you to be happy, Garrus. I want you to have a beautiful life. When you think of me, know that I would have loved to bake you brownies, or the Turian equivalent. I hope I made you proud. I hope your service is valued. You deserve the best. This Omni tool is the only thing I have left from Mindwar, something my parents gave me, something that meant a lot to me. She's yours now, and really not much more than a paperweight. Junk. Same with the stuff in these boxes. They only mean something to me. I'm lucky to have served with you. This weird place in the middle of nowhere is kind of like the inside of my head. Isolated, sheltered, and nobody else goes there. You can show Liara this, or ask her anything you want. I mean, I'm dead. If I can't answer questions then, when can I? Well, that sounded stupid. Anyway, what is important is that the stories don't really matter. You know what you need to know about me. I was Commander Shepard, and that's who I needed to be, who I wanted to be, and I did what I had to do, what I needed to do. And I had the best company. Be well, Garrus. Be who you need to be, who you want to be. Do what you need to do. If there's an afterlife, I'll see you there. If there isn't, that's a shame. I would have liked to have more time.
She smiled, not her strategic smile, but a face he hadn't seen before. Vulnerable, nearly begging to be understood, hopeful. He made a sound that reflected her expression, a building crescendo of losing something he didn't know he had and gaining something nobody could take from him. Permission to feel exactly how he felt. Permission he'd never have found unless he cared enough to really look. He didn't need to ask Liara a damn thing. He was sure she could give him facts, but Lal had just given her heart. That's all he needed, from her voice. He called and expected for there to not be a cat named Hale, but there was, and the owner seemed to find nothing unusual being asked to speak with a cat. He informed them that Commander Shepard was dead, and they said they had seen it on the news, but they knew she would appreciate it if he told Hale for her. He didn't understand, but he did, and he said, "Well, I'm Garrus, and she wanted me to tell you that she's gone. I know she loved you, and I wish..." He almost told a cat he wished they'd met under different circumstances, and then he had to stop. Hale purred, and it sounded like subvocals for a moment, and then Garrus laughed and hung up on a cat. I wish. He encrypted the file 7 different ways, stored it in backups and redundancies, and he was going to do what he had to do, what he needed to do. Executive Vicarian would become Counselor Vicarian, and on display in whatever series of offices he inhabited was going to be a sealed bottle of apple juice, an ancient omni-tool, and a stuffed baron named Sprinklepits. On his face would be her stylized smile. He was going to be proud to be goaded into something suicidal.